Shangyin, Jasper Lake. By Jasper Lake, the Queen Mother of the West throws open her silken curtains. The yellow bamboo song sounds with its grief that moves the world. His 8 steeds could run 30,000 miles a day. So why hasn't King Mu come back to her again? So we continue with Li Shangjing's heptasyllabic quatrains, and just like the one we read yesterday was connected to actual historical events, this one and the next poem, Shangyin, are related to mythological events, although they do have also, especially this first one, a veneer, a patina of history related to them. So first, to understand this poem, we have to understand who the Queen Mother of the West is. Now, the Queen Mother of the West, the Shiwangmu, was a goddess, a religious figure. I think she is already documented in some oracle bone inscriptions, but basically the legends about the Queen Mother of the West became fixed during the Han Dynasty. So this Queen Mother of the West would have been a Taoist-like goddess, a woman with some animal attributes like tiger teeth and immortality. And she was supposed to live in the extreme western end of the world on the Kunlun mountain, next to the Peaches of Immortality, and she became a figure of religious devotion, which was prayed to, and there were even a few religious cults that appeared in the late Han worshipping her. Now, besides this religious facet, she also had a literary facet, because many texts, many poems, especially during the Tang, but earlier on, you have also stories detailing events related to the Xu Wangmu. And the most typical of these stories are visits by emperors who try to reach her land and her mountain so as to achieve immortality. And precisely that story is evoked in this poem. One of those texts about visits of emperors to the West is the so-called Mu Tianzu Chuan, the tale of King Mu, the son of heaven, which details the troubles of this emperor of the Zhou dynasty, and who, well, in this novel, after a long journey to the west, King Mu meets the Queen Mother of the West at her palace near Jasper Lake, and after a brief and passionate visit, he returns to his kingdom, promising to return to her in 3 years. On a later journey, the king saw many of his people frozen to death after a freak storm, so he composed the Yellow Bamboo Song as an elegy to them and resolved never to leave his kingdom again. So this poem is, you say the subject matter of the poem is mythological, but there's also an interesting, how could I say it? There is a grafting on this poem of the conventions of another type of poem. So the topic is mythological, it's describing the Queen Mother of the West pining for the return of her lover, King Mu of Zhou, long since dead at the time this poem is being composed, thousands of years even. And nevertheless, the treatment that is given to the poem follows a form that we've encountered time and time again in this anthology. That is, even though the protagonist is a goddess, the tone and the way in which the poem is formulated feels like the typical Kung Tishi, the palace-style poem, with the beauty, the imperial concubine or wife, pining away in luxurious rooms in the imperial palace and missing her beloved. So that very conventional topic is grafted, as it were, on this mythological story for this poem of Li Shangjing's. Okay, then, so as usual, let's take a look at the poem couplet by couplet. So the first couplet really, the title already says Jasper Lake, which is connected to the Queen Mother of the West's residence, but the first couplet really gives us the mythological historical background. First couplet. By Jasper Lake, the Queen Mother of the West throws open her silken curtains. The yellow bamboo song sounds with its grief that moves the world. So we get in this first couplet two different actions. One of them is visual, the other of them is oral, and this is very typical in Chinese poems when they're making these antithetic parallelisms between one line and the next line. So in the first line, we get the Queen Mother of the West. She is by her residence, by Jasper Lake, and she's opening her silken curtains. Why is she opening the curtains? We might interpret this opening perhaps as an invitation for her paramour to come in and be with her behind the silk curtains. We might interpret it as an anxious act of the Queen Mother of the West, trying to look from beyond the curtains and see if her lover has come at last. Now, the next line doesn't immediately seem to follow from the first, although indirectly you could say it's giving you the explanation of why King Mu has not returned to the Queen Mother of the West. She is probably there anxiously waiting or receptive to the arrival of her paramour. The paramour is not there. Why is he not there? That's what the second line tells us. The yellow bamboo song sounds with its grief that moves the world. Remember, it's because of the suffering of his people that in theory King Mu did not return to the Queen Mother of the West and the promise of immortality and pleasure. So somewhere, is it in the Kunlun Mountains or is it in the Empire? But somewhere that song composed by the emperor is heard, and it's a sad, melancholy song. So both images in the first couplet are probably meant to denote sadness and melancholy. That is, the Queen Mother looking out and not finding, not seeing the person she wants to see. This song being sung or being heard somewhere, and all its denotations of sadness at the death of vassals and subjects are made apparent to the listener. Second couplet. So the second couplet is, as many of these second couplets in quatrains, is a rhetorical question, which takes us inside the mind, as it were, of the Shiwangmu. The Shiwangmu might not know the story of her paramour's vassals dying, and she might not know the reasons why King Mu has not returned, has broken his promise to be back after 3 years to the Kunlun Mountains. So she's speculating, and that's what the second couplet gives us, the speculation. His 8 steeds could run 30,000 miles a day. So why hasn't King Mu come back to her again? So really, the Queen Mother of the West is baffled, saddened, and it's speculating why hasn't he returned? So the poem ends on that note. The reader, of course, versed in classical Chinese culture, knows and has already an indication in line 2 about why King Mu did not return. But, the poem ends with this pining beauty, which so happens to be not the typical wife or imperial concubine, but actually a goddess who is pining away for an emperor. So, yeah, quite an interesting take on what would otherwise be a pretty, conventional topic.